From now on, let us start the first session of the day 2 of the Jeju on the technology, peace, and human rights, how technological development to build sustainable peace in the 21st century. Hello everyone, I'm Kim Ga-young, MC for this session. It's great to see you all. And before we start today's session, let me introduce you the moderator, Mr. Lee Gun, the president of Korea Foundation. He is graduated from the Seoul National University, and he is now a professor of international relations at the Graduate School of International Studies at Seoul National University. He's a former dean of Office of International Affairs at Seoul National University, and he has worked in the Presidential Committee as the future scientist. Now, let me introduce you President Lee Gun. Mr. Lee, please start. Please welcome him with a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you for your introduction.
My name is Lee Gun, president of the Korea Foundation, and it is my honor to chair this morning session. And I would like to welcome you to the Korea Foundation session of the Jeju Forum titled Technology, Peace, and Human Rights, How Technological Development Build Sustainable Peace in the 21st Century. The title may sound a bit futuristic, but this topic will soon become one of the most, if not the most, topics to us in the near future. And particularly countries like Korea, very heavily digitized and wired country, this topic will become our everyday life issue. Technologies are double-edged swords. Technologies help us solving problems, but at the same time, technology create problems as well. So we are going to touch upon these problems, how we can solve our problems with technologies, and how we can deal with the problems which are produced by technologies. And today, this morning, we are very fortunate to have 4 distinguished professors and experts on these issues. And I would like to introduce the speakers of the session from Korea and abroad. First, we have Professor Baek Bum-seok of Kyunghee University, and he will explore possible impacts, opportunities, and challenges of new and emerging digital technologies with regard to the promotion and protection of human rights. And we have Sheldon Himmelfarb, President and CEO of PeaceTech, who will join us online today, and he will tell us about intriguing and eye-opening cases and efforts that PeaceTech Lab has made to establish peace in conflict regions. Ms. Chang Sung-eun, CEO of York, will share the story of York's solar cow project and how it has contributed to enhance the lives of African children. And last but not least, we also have Mr. Laurent Sauver, Director of the Foundation of the International Committee of the Red Cross, and he will share his opinion on human rights and technology development from the perspective of international organizations. Now, I would like to introduce more in detail our first speaker, Professor Baek Bum-seok of Kyunghee University. He is a member of the UN HRC Advisory Committee and served as an advisor to various government agencies and NGOs dealing with human rights issues. His research focuses on international human rights law, transitional justice law and development, and approaches to international law in developing countries. He received his Bachelor of Law from Seoul National University and a Master of Law and a Doctorate of the Science of Law from Cornell Law School. Professor Park Bum-seok, the stage is yours.
Thank you, President. And thank you for Korea Foundation for the invitation to such a valuable event. And also, it is my sincere pleasure to present the UN Human Rights Council's Advice Committee's recent report today. So in 2019, Human Rights Council adopted a resolution, and the Advice Committee is mandated to prepare a report on the impacts, opportunities, and challenges of new technologies with regard to the protection and promotion of human rights. And the drafting group, which is currently composed of 11 committee members, including me as a rapporteur, was established in July same year. And the drafting group distributed a questionnaire among these different stakeholders, and more than 100 responses were received from individual states, UN special procedures, civil society, and academic institutions. In addition, the drafting group and the entire committee has held several meetings to discuss the topic and the different views expressed by the member states and other stakeholders in those meetings. And finally, the report will be presented at the UN Human Rights Council 47th session, which has been started this week. To discuss human rights impact arising from new technologies, this report has several basic assumptions. First, it is oversimplification to argue that technologies are neutral objects and the negative consequences are purely the result of humans misusing them. Technologies, not just the users, also have human rights consequences by limiting users' enjoyment of human rights or influencing a policy, restricting individuals' liberties. The second assumption of this report is that the impact of technological systems on human rights cannot be understood or addressed in isolation. The report recognized that new technologies have great potential to support individuals' rights and freedoms, especially exercising the freedom of expression and association, and also to enhance the empowerment of individuals in the real world through technologies such as automation and robotics. However, not all technologies have initially designed to serve human rights purposes, and we need to be conscious of potential loopholes. Therefore, the report highlights that these new technologies pose significant challenges to human rights. These challenges can be categorized into 7 groups. First, privacy violations can arise from excessive datafication of new technologies. Threats to privacy should not be dismissed as an inevitable price for progress because the erosion of the right to privacy can weaken the entire human rights framework. And it is too complicated for average users to understand the data processing algorithms of digital services. Moreover, with the rapid spread of COVID-19 worldwide, some efforts to combat the pandemic may be failing to meet the standards of legality, necessity, and proportionality. So even considering the gravity of the pandemic situation, the critical question remains as to what extent government should and can access personal information. Second, poor cybersecurity may lead to severe violation of privacy. Business and governance models that rely on users' data are not easily reconciled with protecting individuals' right to privacy and minimizing personal data disclosure online. Third, with the digital revolution, information is cheaper and faster. But it is also increasingly difficult to separate it from misinformation, also called fake news. The internet has profoundly changed the way media contents are produced and experienced. New technologies render it even more challenging to maintain and assess the authenticity of the information. First, new technologies easily enable the rapid spread of hate speech, resulting in radicalization, segregation, hate crimes, and discrimination. Digital media and social networking can intensify hate speech and dissemination of hateful speech and ideas. At the same time, even though unintended, discriminatory outcomes may result from AI decision making if based on biased algorithm. Fifth, as the internet becomes the primary method of communication and access to information, human rights risks can negatively impact the vulnerable populations lacking digital access. The technological empowerment will likely continue to be uneven, aggregating existing inequalities or creating new forms of vulnerability. Six, illegal and arbitrary mass surveillance may occur involving indiscriminatory monitorings of the entire or significant portion of the population. All too often, surveillance is conducted without appropriate safeguards, which infringes unreasonably on the privacy. In the same vein, digital access and digital spaces are also used to curtail the freedom of expression, access to information, and the right to assembly. Seventh, new technologies have created new and unprecedented criminal challenges, such as sexual exploitation, copyright infringement, financial extortions, and cyberbullying. The UN Special Rapporteur on the right to privacy also point out that new technologies have amplified some forms of gender abuse. And after examining the challenges and potential violation of human rights by new technologies, this report reviews the progress by the UN and international community in understanding and responding to the issues contingent on new technologies. The transboundary nature of new technologies and business models show that domestic approaches alone are not enough. There is a growing need for a comprehensive approach to deal with these complex issues. The report maintains that new technology and business models are putting the current international human rights framework under unprecedented strain and exposing gaps in ongoing responses. The first type of gaps are conceptual ones. Simply put, most international human rights instruments were initially drafted for the offline world and may not reflect the realities of digital age. But the adoption of new treaties or international agreement or amending the existing ones seems not to be advisable at this moment. The engineering community lacks an understanding of human rights, and human rights community does not have an understanding of technologies. A new technological system may improve the enjoyment of one type of human rights, but simultaneously imperil the enjoyment of others, paradoxically resulting in a trade-off between different human rights. Therefore, without firm guidance from human rights community, the designers of technological systems may end up picking and choosing which right to protect or not. Such a problem can be further complicated by the proliferation of different ethical principles and voluntary codes of conduct by private entities and corporations that only cover a limited range of human rights. The second category of gaps consists of operational ones. This category focuses on how new technologies are causing practical challenges for states. Due to the inevitable existence of gaps between the enactment of regulations and the development of new technologies, government need to expect voluntary compliance by the private sector, at least in the short term, because social consciousness and consultation need to precede the enactment of regulations. Such operational gaps often involve broader questions of international governance too. New technologies are global and transnational in scope, but regulatory efforts tend to remain national or regional. Therefore, there is the possibility of overlaps as international institutions and the UN member states begin to develop policies on new technologies independently. To minimize such a gap, international consultation between states and international organizations is required to identify the overlaps and gaps in these regulatory efforts. Finally, this report concludes with the recommendations of the holistic human rights approach to new technologies, including the following three pillars. First, the holistic understanding of technology. It requires an awareness of the complexity and interdependency of new technologies and understanding of the whole datafication cycle, not just an individual technology. In this regard, the interconnections between different types of innovations and their overall human rights consequences should be carefully traced. Moreover, it is critical to understand the human rights implications of each stage of the development of technology, including its design, manufacture, implementation, and even disposal. The second pillar is a holistic approach to human rights. It requires translating human rights norms into practical standards that are understandable for business and engineers. If the first pillar requires human rights experts learning about technologies, the second pillar requires teaching engineers about human rights. It is essential because many critical decisions that will affect users' human rights are made on the drawing boards by technical experts at the early stages of development of technology. Design processes need to consider universal human rights, including economic, social, and cultural rights, as well as rights of women, persons with a disability, children, and other vulnerable groups. The last pillar is a holistic governance and regulatory efforts by states, international organizations, and all relevant stakeholders. Accelerating the development and proliferation of new technologies seem inevitable, but their impacts on human rights can be effectively shaped through the joint efforts of multi-stakeholders. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Beck-Bumsok. That was really an eye-opening presentation. I think we entered into a new age of human rights discussion with the introduction of new technologies. The next speaker is Sheldon Himmelfarb, the president and CEO of the PeaceTech Lab, and he will give his speech on the contribution of the PeaceTech Lab to solving the real-life problems. Before establishing PeaceTech Lab, Mr. Sheldon Himmelfarb was a member of the corporate executive board at the United States Institute of Peace, also known as USIP, where he was on the technology practice leadership team, working with chief information officers from governments, universities, and multinational corporations. Prior to this, he served as foreign policy advisor at the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He's an award-winning filmmaker, former commentator for National Public Radio, NPR, and author of numerous articles on politics, popular culture, and conflict. He holds a doctorate from Oxford University and a bachelor's degree in political science from Johns Hopkins University. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Sheldon Himmelfarb.
Thank you very, very much. I hope you can hear me okay. Hello, everyone. It is a truly great honor to be here with you. I was just so impressed listening to my colleague there from the UN Human Rights Council. I think he did such a great job of capturing some of the complexities that we all wrestle with every day when it comes to new technologies. As you just heard, I am the founding CEO of the PeaceTech Lab, and we're an independent nonprofit organization that was spun out from the United States Institute of Peace almost 7 years ago now. And our mission, simply put, is to amplify the power of technology to save lives above its power for harm and hatred that you hear so much about in the news. And how we do this is honestly blindingly simple. We work with courageous peace builders around the world, people who are already fighting corruption, preventing hate crimes, defending human rights, countering gender violence, or struggling to tackle the food and water insecurity that comes with climate change. We help these extraordinary people to do more, better, faster with technology, because that's what tech does. It is a force multiplier. Our tagline in the PeaceTech Lab is, we put the right tools in the right hands to build peace, which really grew out of my own personal experience in the 90s, many, many years ago, working in Africa after the Rwandan genocide, where radio was the technology used to incite mass killing. 800,000 people died, mostly Tutsis killed by Hutus. In the wake of this horror, I worked with an incredible group of local journalists, Hutus and Tutsis, to set up a new radio station. And most of them knew someone who was killed in that genocide. And I will never forget asking one of them, a Tutsi who had lost his brother, how did he feel about working with the Hutus? And he told me that it was the only way to get peace. He would do anything to bring peace to his community. He just wanted our help. Well, you can imagine how that hit me. I left there committed to figuring out ways, as you've heard, to put the right tools and the right resources into the hands of people like him. And that's what I've been doing ever since, with the help of a very, very talented team, which I hope you'll get to meet someday. If any of you are in Washington, D.C., where we are headquartered, please come and visit us. That said, I hasten to add that we also have a lab in Kenya and an affiliate lab in the Netherlands. In both cases, we are really experimenting with different kinds of lab models. The one in the Netherlands is actually more of a franchise where we provide them with our intellectual property, our experience, our IP, but they fund their activities entirely and we collaborate on some projects. So because this is a global conference, I wanted you all to know if there is someone interested in starting a PeaceTech Lab in your community, please get in touch with me. You will see my email address at the end here of this of the slides I'm going to show you. Now, I've been asked to give you an overview of technology for peace building, and I always think that the best way to make this concept come alive is by telling you about the programs we have going at the PeaceTech Lab. But first, let me hasten to say that if there's anything I've learned in these days of endless Zoom calls, it is to try to keep things short. So I've got no intention of talking at you for very long. I'd rather stimulate your thinking and then we can have a good conversation afterward. I hope that is okay. So, as I said earlier, we work with local community leaders, activists, and change agents to provide them with technology tools, strategies, and training that will enable them to do more, better, faster in tackling the drivers of violence in their communities. And as a practical matter, that means that in 2021, we have the following programs underway, and I'm going to share my screen now. I hope you can all see that. There we go. Okay. So we have the following programs underway. This is the first one I'd like to talk about, the COVID-19 Violence Tracker. This is our flagship data program this year, and we're working with a consortium of partners, including companies like Mapbox, universities like Georgia Tech and Rongo University in Kenya, as well as the Digital 100 Data Group in Europe. And together, we're working to identify COVID-related violence, classify it according to its type, whether it is due to government crackdowns or domestic abuse or attacks on backlash against Asian Americans or attacks on health workers and so on. At the lab, we have been focused on using data for early warning of violence since our first day. So much progress has been made in data tools like machine learning, natural language processing, and artificial intelligence, as you know. But at the same time, we have for the first time real access to data about human sentiment from social media. Human sentiment, that is the DNA of conflict that we finally have within our reach. And that means we have significantly better data-driven opportunities for violence prevention. The tracker is designed to help us learn how to isolate COVID-related violence and understand that phenomena. But by doing so, we're also learning a great deal about how to isolate other drivers of violence, such as scarcity caused by climate change, or election-related violence, or gender-based violence, and so on. Sorry, we are missing one of our slides here. I'm going to stop screen sharing. Something is missing here. If you don't mind, I'm going to stop here and pull up a different group of slides that I'm sure. There we go. I apologize. I'm gonna just speak about another program right here before I go on to the next slide, because it's very important that you understand that we don't just work internationally. Our other program is our PeaceTech Exchange program, where for 7 years, we've been providing technology, tools, and strategies to more than 1,500 organizations in over 25 countries. And this year, and this is why I was looking for the different presentation, this year we added the United States to the mix with a special initiative called the Road to Equal Justice. And this year, we are going to at least 16 cities across America with a series of workshops to empower citizens with tools to accelerate and amplify their efforts for social justice. So far, we've provided training to over 100 nonprofits in Baltimore, in Denver, in Boston, and in Miami. And what we've learned in these communities is completely consistent with what we've learned in fragile states around the world. These local change makers are hungry, first and foremost, for techniques to gather, analyze, and visualize data. So we may introduce them to a very simple cell phone-based survey tool, such as Kobo Toolbox, so they can collect data easily. Or we may introduce them to a crowd mapping tool like Ushahidi that is dead easy for crowdsourcing data. And it's something we used in Iraq to help organizations fighting corruption to map attacks on journalists, since you must have a functioning media sector to reduce corruption. Okay, now that brings me to our hate speech program, where we have invested heavily in trying to understand online hate speech and its relationship to offline violence. So we have created these guides to hate speech in over 13 countries, from Yemen and Iraq to South Sudan and South Africa, and most recently in Ethiopia. As we all know, and as you've just heard from my colleague, online hate speech and, of course, fake news posts that travel with the speed of electrons are undoubtedly inciting some of the real-world violence. But we've learned that often that hate speech can be in code. The social media companies with the most sophisticated AI and other tools are struggling to keep up with the hate speech language. So our team has become something of an expert in code breaking. We work with local experts to identify, monitor, catalog these terms for the lexicons that are then used by local peace builders to intervene, as well as by social media companies trying to take down dangerous speech before it spreads. Which brings me to the fourth leg of our table, and that is our work in peace media. For many years, we have known that behavior change communications is a powerful tool for helping to cultivate a culture of tolerance and for helping to humanize the other. Our children's television series in Iraq, which you see there on the top right of the screen, was made entirely by Iraqi producers with our help, and it ran for 4 years. It won the UNESCO Prize for Intercultural Dialogue. It was essentially a game show for teenagers, but it was so much more than that as well. It was the first time that many of these young people from different parts of the country came together to compete in mixed boys and girls, Sunni and Shia teams. And the evaluations that we had done of the kids' views towards the others before participating and after participating, other children before viewing the series and after viewing the series, these evaluations showed pretty dramatic changes in perceptions. Reaching millions of young people over a sustained period of time can be a powerful influencer, not to mention a great source of hope in a very tough environment. And that's why this year, we are in our 5th season of an award-winning radio drama for the South Sudanese people, as you see there on the top left, called Sawa Shabab. Again, entirely locally produced, but with our training help. So there you have our 4 flagship programs this year, all aimed at equipping local communities with the tech, the media, the data tools that can enable them to do more, better, faster peace building. The bottom line for us in the PeaceTech Lab is that tech disrupts everything, whether it's coming up with vaccines in record time or sending fake news around the world to millions of people with the push of a button. We at the lab focus every day on figuring out how can we use tech to disrupt how we wage peace? How can we do it better? We take this term lab in our title very seriously, and are always looking for new ways of doing these things better, which is one reason I'm so interested in this conversation here today. The good news is, as you can see on this slide, we're not alone. If you see there in the top right, nearly every day we meet another person or organization developing a clever way to use technology to counter violence in their communities. And it's become a movement, as you see from this headline in Fast Company magazine. It's become a movement which we never anticipated when we first coined the word PeaceTech back in 2011. So please join us. Please become our partners. And I mean this very seriously. Become our partners in this PeaceTech movement, which we celebrated with our very first International Peace Honors event, as you'll see from this closing clip that I'd like to play for you. So if you can indulge me for a minute.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be taking part in this prestigious International Peace Honors by PeaceTech Lab.
How honored I am to be recognized by PeaceTech Lab with this award.
Because of the hope that technology can be used in a way to bring about more justice and hence more peace.
So celebrates the importance and the power of technology to help to bring peace to the world. We couldn't ask for more than that, an opportunity for technology to do its work, to bring safety, security, and peace in a very troubled world.
It is with great honor and humility I accept this recognition from the International Peace Honors. We are stronger together, that we are so capable of things we never thought possible to accomplish alone.
Hasta que no haya un rincón en la tierra lleno de paz y de amor, no vamos a parar.
Wash the stains away, but something our mind will always stay.
Y levanta una torre desde el cielo hasta aquí, y me cose unas alas y me ayuda a subir a toda prisa.
Thank you all for watching, and thank you for your support. See you guys next year.
So, as you heard Ricky Martin say, we are much stronger together. So I welcome your partnership. You saw my email address there. Please contact me. We can discuss collaboration, partnership, which is so vital to solving the world's greatest challenges. As it is as vital, our partnership and collaboration is as vital as the technology itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Himmelfarb, for letting us know so many marvelous things that the PeaceTech Lab has been doing all around the world. I do think that it would be wonderful that PeaceTech and some of the Korean organizations will have partnership relations. Of course, one of the lessons that we learned from Dr. Himmelfarb's wonderful presentation is that what matters is not the technology per se, but how the human beings, how we take advantage of the technology for the sake of peace and human rights. Thank you very much, Dr. Himmelfarb. Now I would like to introduce very impressive rising star of South Korea in the area of startups and new technologies. Ms. Chang, CEO of York, she will introduce the solar cow project. She majored in object design at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and she established York. Its first innovation, York's first innovation, solar paper, is a paper-thin solar charger, which has won the CES Innovation Award. Solar paper raised $1 million on Kickstarter. Chang was inspired to launch the Solar Cow project to solve two challenges. 1 in 5 children in Africa cannot go to school due to the prevalence of child labor. And the second challenge is while 80% of people living in rural areas do not have access to electricity. The Solar Cow won, as I said, the 2019 CES Innovation Award and the IAF Social Impact Prize and the Green Award, and was selected as partnership project at the 2021 P4G Summit in Seoul. Very impressive career and very impressive record. Now I'd like to introduce Ms. Chang.
Hello everyone. I am CEO Chang of York. I am very grateful to have this opportunity to present before you. I would like to begin my presentation on the title of Technology, Peace, and Human Rights. What comes into your mind when you think of the technology? AI or the trip to Mars? Those technologies that accelerate our life and make our life very convenient. And maybe in some time in the future, we would encounter an alien from another the space or another planet. However, there's a great portion of people, that's 1.3 billion people, do not have great access to energy, and they are still using their kerosene. And a lot of 1 out of 5 children cannot go to school because they are child laborers. So let me introduce our project. One out of 5 children cannot go to school because they need to go to the workplace. And the little money they bring to their household is very important because their families are very poor. I have to go to the town to charge the equipment using for my farming, and to charge my mobile phone. It also I have to travel a long distance. By using solar panel, we could get enough energy for the family members to run their devices and to charge their power batteries.
School. If students can bring full of energy at the end of every school day, it will be a big contribution for their families and motivate parents to send their children to the school.
She accepts the child to go to school.
Oh, really? So you will allow
Kalau itu ni, yang mana mungkin, mungkin
Yes.
Dah terus school ni kan nyuruh tu. Ah, mama. Somebody who has been educated, you will not only change your life, but
Getting education, it does not change the one individual life, but it changes the entire community and our society as a whole. What do you want to become in the future, doctor? And I want to become a pilot and police officer. Can you imagine what kind of the great changes that solar cow would bring to African community? So please join us, Solar Cow Project, York. So as you have seen from the screen, the video clip, in Africa, the use of the penetration of the mobile phone is very high, but in comparison, the energy supply is very low. So to charge the mobile phone, they have to travel 2 or 4 hours simply to charge their mobile phones. After we have the solar power the system in the African community, the children can have time to go to school. Because in many families, those children were responsible to travel 2 to 4 hours to charge the phones for the family. So thanks to this project, the things that we do is to supply the children with the textbooks and educational supplies. But before that, there is one more thing that we need to take into account. We had to persuade the parents to send their children to the school. So that we first had to ask their parents to voluntarily to send to their children to school, and so that if they send their children to school, we looked for what kind of incentives we can we can offer to those parents. So the impact of solar cow has 5 things. One is a high attendance rates in the schools, and then the students, the teachers can also stabilize their teaching hours and also increase the teaching and hours to the students. And the one thing that we found is that all those students had higher self-esteem and higher the efficiency, so that they felt they are very proud of themselves because they were able to study, and also the parents had higher the expectations and then higher motivation to send their children to school. So all these all these come together have generated the positive impact, and in the society as a whole, the ICT devices can be one of the tools for the students' learning, and in other countries, use of the ICT devices in education sector can be a very easy thing, but in countries like Africa, where with very low the supply of energy, the ICT the learning can be very difficult. But thanks to our solar cow project, this were possible, and we have and then the solar cow project was awarded in the Aid Innovation Challenge year 2018, and also CBS Innovation Awards in the year 2019. And in Korea, among the SEMs, solar cow won the Green Awards. And there are challenges that not in our society as a whole suffer from those environmental challenges, and our solar cow projects are in line with worldwide challenge in terms of the environment. So the schools will, in the era of COVID-19, our solar the project was also very important, and we could let students study through the radios, because a lot of students were not able to go to school during this COVID time. The schools were all shut down, and all those the radio. When we think about this use of this radio, well, there was also, we have this energy of the problem at this time as well. So to deal with this lack of energy supply, which disturbed the use of this radio, we came up with another idea of developing this different the education devices, so that to distribute to the students. And when by using this solar panel, and also solar panel and our special devices, these kind of devices were already exist. It's not something that's totally new. Then the great meaning that our solar cow project has is that we utilize it for the betterment of the entire world. So that's the message that we have. Thank you very much.
Ms. Chang Sung-eun, for your very interesting project, introduction of your very interesting project. I thought the solar cow project was an energy project, but I realized that it is more of an education program project for the children in Africa. The new energy technology provides the children in Africa incentives to study and educate themselves in schools, and that really impresses me most. I do think that the future of Korea, let alone the world, will be bright, because we have the next generation leaders like Ms. Chang Sung-eun, very brilliant and warm-hearted next generation leaders. The last speaker will be Mr. Laurent Sauvert, Director of the Foundation of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Previously, Mr. Sauvert was the Chief of External Relations for the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, overseeing the external communications and partnerships programs of the organization. Mr. Sauvert has over 20 years of external relations experience, and he worked for the private sector as well as international NGOs like Doctors Without Borders and Care International, focusing on humanitarian operations and the fight against extreme poverty. Now I would like to call upon Mr. Laurent Sauvert.
Good morning. It is a privilege to participate in this session hosted by the Korea Foundation at the Jeju Forum. I'm sorry I cannot be with you today due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but I look forward to the outcome of your discussions, and I hope my contribution will help inform your thinking on this important topic, technology and human rights. Let me first give you a bit of my background. I am today the director of the Foundation for the International Committee of the Red Cross, but for the past 5 years, I was the Chief of External Relations at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, serving under Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein and more recently, Michelle Bachelet. While I'm not speaking on behalf of the UN Human Rights Office, I will draw from my experience there to explore the topic at hand today. Let me start by emphasizing that digital technology can deliver many incredible benefits. Its value for human rights and development is enormous. We can connect and communicate around the globe as never before. We can empower, inform, and investigate. We can use encrypted communication, satellite imagery, and data streams to directly defend and promote human rights. We can even use artificial intelligence to predict human rights violations. At the United Nations, this is why we engage in several partnerships with tech companies to leverage digital technology for good. With Microsoft, for instance, we developed a dashboard connecting various isolated internal and external databases on human rights as a way to give a synthetic overview of the human rights situation in any given country. We were also a partner of Code for Code, an initiative by IBM and David Clark that looks at mobilizing the global community of developers to solve the biggest issues of our time, starting with climate change. However, we cannot ignore that the digital revolution is a major global human rights issue. Its unquestionable benefits do not cancel out its unmistakable risks. It's worth emphasizing that the reference to look at human rights and technology remains the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, this milestone document adopted in 1948 that lays out the 30 rights that all human beings are entitled to. It is important to understand that the same rights exist offline and online. We cannot afford to see cyberspace and artificial intelligence as a human rights black hole. If you allow me, I would like now to highlight three main challenges posed to human rights by digital technology. Let me start by the risk to the right of privacy. You know that when we go online, we leave a digital mark. When we browse the internet or go on social media, we are giving away some personal data. This data collection is already happening on an industrial scale. States, political parties, businesses hold very detailed and powerful information about us. More and more aspects of our lives are being digitally tracked, stored, and used. The misuse of data can lead then to various serious consequences, like the influencing of elections and the manipulations of voters. We're talking here about the political direction of countries. Another example of how online data can be badly used is when digital surveillance tools are used to track and target human rights defenders perceived as critics. Let me now talk about another major risk, how we use and rely on artificial intelligence. There is a lot of talk about AI, even fantasies. If I am to schematize what AI does, it helps us score, assess, categorize with a view to offering some predictions. But experts will tell you that the output of the AI process, the predictions, are always as good as the data that you are inputting at the beginning of the process. And when you predict something based on data that I'm not saying are flawed, but are biased or represent an inequality embedded in our society, then the output at the end is de facto a prediction where this inequality will be embedded too. So the question becomes, how do we correct this bias so that AI takes us to a world that is better instead of replicating a world that is unequal? And last, the third challenge to human rights I would like to talk about is the threat posed to freedom of expression. Online harassment, trolling campaigns, and intimidations are on the rise and pose very real offline threats. Look at what happened in Myanmar with the Rohingya community. Human rights investigators found that a well-known social media platform was used to spread hate speech and incitement to violence against this community. These grave violations of human rights leave no room for doubt. Threats, intimidation, and cyberbullying on the internet lead to real-world targeting, harassment, violence, and murder. But on the other hand, over-regulation to limit free speech in the online space is also a critical human rights issue. Let me give you a very chilling statistic. Last year, in 2020, there were about 155 internet shutdowns in 29 countries, and this figure is on the rise. So the questions become, what do we do now? What is the way forward? As I mentioned in my introduction, these challenges drive us back to the timeless principle of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and in rights. Each person has the right to live his or her life free from discrimination, to political participation, to privacy, online and offline. To respect these rights in our evolving world, we must ensure that the digital revolution is serving the people and not the other way around. We must ensure that every machine-driven process or AI system complies with key principles such as transparency, fairness, accountability, and oversight. And whose responsibility is it to tackle these multiple complex risks, will you ask? States, businesses, NGOs? The United Nations would tell you all of the above, in partnership, with a sense of shared responsibility and ownership. We need a universal response in defense of universal human rights. As a conclusion, I would say that there is no part of the digital revolution that cannot and should not be viewed from a human rights perspective. As digital frontiers expand, there is an urgency for more transparency, for more accountability, and for more oversight. I would like to leave you with a quote by the High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet that sums it very nicely, I believe. At its best, the digital revolution can connect, can inform, can empower, can save lives. But at its worst, it can disconnect, disempower, misinform, and cost lives. Human rights will make all the difference to that equation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Laurent Chauvel. The last presentation is closely related to Professor Beckbom's first presentation on the human rights and new technologies. I do think that one of the roles of international organizations is to disseminate and educate the human rights problems of the new technologies, and Mr. Laurent Chauvel's presentation describes that role of international organizations very well. Now it is going to be a fun time, the question and answer session. Thanks to very succinct and efficient presentations by the four speakers, we have a kind of plenty of time to discuss these important issues. Perhaps this is one of the most efficient sessions or seminars I have ever chaired, because we have about 15 minutes to collect questions and comments. The questions we are going to collect from the floor, and also at the same time we will collect questions from our online audience. Before I ask questions that we collect from the online audience, I'd like to give opportunities to the audience who are present at this forum. If you have any questions or comments, please raise your hand, and please be kind to raise your comments, opinions, or ask questions. Yes, please. The lady on the first row.
네, 오늘
Thank you very much for your presentations. I have a question to CEO Chang Sung-eun. And how did you first come up with the idea of the solar, the power, this project? I found it very interesting, and it is for those. I think it is the most important thing is that to increase the public awareness, because you need to. Do you have any special know-how? How did you persuade the funders? How did you raise your funds? Because getting those how did you get the public awareness? Because that's one of the keys to the project. First of all, well, as you see from our new the video clip, we have this new projects. Well, the thing that we focus on when we make this video clip, as you have seen our promotional video clip, is that one thing that we especially take importance is that, well, the thing that this helping those African kids in the solar panel system is not things of other business, but it is relevant to ourselves too. So when we make those promotional video clips, we make it in a way that is more relevant to those the audiences and viewers. And then each the students has with using this our projects, well, they have this the code, and so that's when the students comes to school and they tag on this the ID card, then all those the information attendance related records are the traceable in the data wise. And by providing those kind of information, so it is will we not only deliver the message, but we also this by use it in a digital the data wise as well. Thank you very much. Another question. You majored in arts design, and how did you came to think about this technology thing? How did you collaborate all those engineers and technology related experts? Because your major is arts. I majored in design and arts, and one of the features that art has. It is not just a styling, but we also need to target the very intrinsic nature. So then that is one of the features, nature of the design. And then those are the key part. Can be the solar panel or it can be environment. So our previous projects was also gained a lot of attention from around the world, and that was the solar battery project. So our second project, we wanted to solve the problem by using our the device in a much needed area. And for those engineers that I work with, when I wanted to I wanted to work with those people who are actually in that field to make it more efficient.
Or comments. If you have any questions or comments, please raise your hand from the floor. There's the gentleman from the second row.
네, 이번 세션을 통해서
This session has been very inspirational to me. With the rapid development of technology, we have some kind of gray area in protecting human rights, right? We have Chang Sung-eun, CEO of Yongseong. Your project was very impressive. you are working in energy kind of poverty country like Africa, and you are contributing to the countries in the sector of education, all right? And I think you are making great development and contribution. I mean, regarding the human rights of those children. No, I personally think of the possible startup. I mean, starting my own business. However, I think I have not considered the human rights. So, what can you do for us? I mean, for Korean startups to be more involved in the human rights sector? In my sector, okay, thank you for your good comment on our project. Okay, let me talk about how our project is related to the human rights. When it comes to technology, sometimes it's good, but sometimes it has some problems, like a bad effect, like some infringement on privacy or human rights. So we are making very cautious steps in this regard. For instance, regarding data, previously, if we use some photos or some kind of writings of those children, it was okay. We used those photos and writings to get kind of sponsorship. However, I mean, using photos or writings were not all. Actually, we made more kind of some impressive messages. However, it can be it can lead to infringement of privacy of those children. So I also donate some money for to save children, and so sometimes I get the photos of those children, and there can be problem. They can could lead to a problem about privacy. So the personal information of children, rather than making public of the information of those children, I think we are making very cautious steps to better protect the human rights of the children. Thank you very much.
Turn to our online audience. We have a few questions from our online audience. Can I take a look at the questions? This question is written in Korean, so I'm going to read in Korean. 국가별
By country, by age, I think the access to technology is different. Access to technology varies by age groups and by country. And the differences may lead to may result in differences in achieving our human rights goals. How we can overcome this? I mean, how we can get rid of the challenge, the differences. I think this question should go to Professor Beck.
Okay. Individual nation. Each country has a different level of the technology, and in that regard, should each country should we place a different the human rights related the policies per each country? And I agree with that. And then because of that, the universal and collective efforts is very important. And what's more important is that the regional UN the policies. And all those stakeholders, will be it civil societies or the academia or the businesses, they need to all actively participate in this regard, especially in UN. What UN emphasizes that multi-stakeholderism is very important, so that by listening to the opinions and feedbacks from many different parties, then we can solve the problem that you have mentioned. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you.
To Dr. Himmelfarb. about building relationship with the governmental actors. I do think that your projects are very effective in terms of information politics and symbolic politics awareness programs. But in order to make actions, the approach could be both bottom up and top down. And I do think that particularly the governmental action should be mobilized. And I wonder what kind of strategy do you have in terms of building effective relationship with the governmental actors?
I think it's a great question, important question. We are in many of the countries where we work, as you can appreciate, we work with activists who are on the front lines of human rights, and the governments there are on the other side of the issue. Are trying to crack down on these individuals. So we're constantly having to thread that needle, as you have rightfully described. And we work very hard at reaching out to government officials wherever we work and to bring them into the dialogue. Because I could not agree with you more, and in my experience, anyone who's worked in peace building understands that in order to have a lasting peace, it's got to be bottom up and top down. But by the same token, we are always trying to remind governments who are having this conversation. I mean, it's been a brilliant conversation about the human rights implications here of new technologies. And there are always these ongoing conversations about how do you protect human rights? How do you regulate the social companies, social media companies in order to protect privacy and so forth? And what we find is too often the bottom-up piece is not represented in those conversations. So our position is you have to have all of the parties around the table if you want a sustainable agreement, and want to make sure you're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater when you're looking at data privacy issues. When you're, I mean, I remember one of the issues on the table today for handling misinformation, disinformation, fake news is, should we re-architect the internet in order to have something in between a US model of unfettered anonymity and a China model or other government models of having very little anonymity online? How do you re-architect the internet to have bounded anonymity so people, you know who you're speaking with? And in fact, those conversations demand having the activists at the table, because for them, being able to do what they do, the anonymity is a critical factor. So again, I think you said it very well, Dr. Yen. It's got to be top down and bottom up.
Thank you very much, Dr. Himmelfarb. We have one from our online audience, but unfortunately our time is running out. So now I'd like to close the Korea Foundation session on a very important topic on the relationship between technology, peace, and human rights. Finally, our MC is going to introduce the next session, right?
꽤 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다.
Thank you very much. Okay, this concludes the first session of day 2 on the technology, peace, and human rights. How technological development to build sustainable peace in the 21st century. Thank you for attending this session. After a break, From 10:50, we have a second session on Pyeongchang 2018 Winter Olympic Games and Public Diplomacy for Peace. Please join us in the second session. Thank you very much.